Hello.
It's 8:15.
Let us continue with Swami Rama and a call to humanity. A call to humanity, subtitled Revolutionary Thoughts on the Direction for Spiritual and Social Reform in Our Time. And we're just now starting chapter 2, which is entitled Religion and Dharma. Dharma, what a fabulous word. The words religion and dharma denote two entirely different concepts and perspectives. Hello, Atma. Religion is comprised of rituals, customs, and dogmas surviving on the basis of fear and blind faith. Hi, Eileen. Hello, Susan. Dharma, a word unfortunately with no English equivalent, encapsulates those great laws and disciplines that uphold, sustain, and ultimately lead humanity to the sublime heights of worldly and spiritual glory. Established in the name of God, a religion is an institution that requires a growing number of adherents for its expansion and future existence. Hi, Rosalind. Hello, Gurvinder. Hi, Bart. A religion discriminates against human beings who do not belong to its particular order and condemns their way of living and being. Whereas Dharma is eternal, looking for no followers for its propagation. With no discrimination whatsoever, it leads a human being beyond the realms of man-made, institutionalized dictums. Instead of creating fear of God, it makes God manifest in the human heart, not in an anthropomorphic form, but as the absolute and universal one, in whom all diversities reside in perfect harmony. Hi, Nellie. Dharma shines in the form of truth, nonviolence, love, compassion, forbearance, forgiveness, and mutual sharing. A real follower of Dharma includes all and excludes none. Instead of following commandments under the pressure of the fear of fear or guilt, the aspirant commits himself to discipline and self-transformation. Hi, Mir. He welcomes eternal Dharma, the Dharma that has as its architect none other than the divine force, the ultimate truth, big T truth. The followers of true Dharma welcome and incorporate only those rules and laws in life that do not interfere with the growth of others, and at the same time are helpful in enhancing one's creativity and purpose in life. In the history of civilization, never did a prophet or an incarnation of God introduce a, quote, new Dharma. The sages served as channels for introducing the perennial Dharma to mankind. And whenever the Dharma taught by the great sages appeared to be eclipsed, a great soul incarnated. The great Master Krishna offered the essence of the Upanishads in a most coherent and practical manner to Arjuna. He introduced a healthy lifestyle through which people could attain the state of peace, here and now. Hi, Betty. His teachings were not confined to a particular place or time. However, with the passage of time, people formed a cult around him, dividing society in pieces and creating bitterness among human beings. Thus, new religions with various branches were born. When people forget the true message of the Vedas and confine themselves to rigid customs and rituals, Lord Buddha was born. He taught the Vedic path of enlightenment, the method of transcending pain and misery. Alas, soon after his departure, his followers abandoned the true import of his teachings and introduced Buddhism as a distinct religion, confining the Buddha's teachings to a particular group. A lot of food for thought here, isn't there? We get to reflect on these for ourselves and decide for ourselves how we see reality and the world. Dharma, thus, is that which is taught by the sages, and religion is more often than not unreasoned faith. Religion is enriched by visionary mythology and theology, whereas Dharma blooms in the realm of direct experience. Religion contributes to the changing phases of a culture. Dharma enhances the beauty of spirituality. Religion may inspire one to build a fragile mortal home for God. Dharma helps one to recognize the immortal shrine in the heart. Religion may be an exciting field for anthropological study, producing numerous volumes of literature, but it is Dharma alone that teaches one how to open the book of life and how to make the best use of all that lies therein. Religion may be helpful in regulating a few of the primitive tendencies, such as fear and greed, but Dharma alone can help us transcend our animal instincts and step to the next rung of human awareness. All the great religions of the world, hi Raj, all the great religions of the world have evolved from the inner experiences of sages. The truths realized by the sages were passed on from generation to generation through an unbroken lineage of seers, and at a certain point in the history of each tradition, people collected and preserved the highlights of the teachings in written form. Thus, the scriptures came into existence. Sacred scriptures are considered to be revealed texts, since the knowledge presented therein is not based on ordinary sensory perception or mere logic and reasoning. The wisdom of the scriptures has intuitive revelation as its source and is known through a pure heart rather than through mere intellectual pursuits. The Vedas are a source of a great universal tradition, but unfortunately there are very few who are familiar with this treasure house of wisdom. There are several other Eastern scriptures that explain various nuances, but the seeds of even these scriptures are found in the vast body of Vedic literature. These teachings can be understood as a tree of perennial truth. The Vedas are the roots, the rest of the scriptures are its branches, leaves, and flowers, and the fruit of this tree is the perennial truth, big T truth. Independent thinking, contemplation, and openness can help one realize the truth. Serious aspirants should delve into the essence of the Vedas and the Upanishads. That is possible only if one purifies and sharpens one's intellect through positive, logical thinking. One should not be easily influenced by the opinions of others. An opinionated thinker fails to direct his power of discrimination and remains entangled in his self-created net of confusion. The universal Vedic tradition is like a confluence where the stream of knowledge, selfless action, and love merge into one another. These three streams touch the three distinct but interfacing aspects of human existence: the spiritual world, the external world, and the mental emotional world. The stream of knowledge reveals the true nature of inner life. The stream of selfless action enlivens one's relationship with the external world, whereas the stream of love brings a stability in one's mental and emotional life. By following the well-balanced path of knowledge, selfless action, and love, one attains perfection here and now. Such a seeker realizes his oneness with the universal consciousness and attains the goal professed by all religions. Every human being is endowed with three intrinsic capabilities: truth, willpower, or inner strength, and love. Truth, willpower, or inner strength, and love. By unfolding these potentials, one attains perfection. Therefore, according to the Vedas, the path that combines knowledge, selfless action, and love helps unfold the intrinsic potentials of truth, willpower, and selfless love, and is the essence of true religion. The Vedic tradition welcomes any religion or faith as long as it meets these essentials of human fulfillment. Unparalleled are the Vedic ideals that declare, a religion is not religion at all if it asserts its superiority over other faiths, and practice only that part of the discipline that helps you to grow without hurting others. Today, humanity needs to wake up and become determined to restore high ideals, human values, and divine virtues. One must devote time to the search for the origin of one's own religion, which is never other than the truth itself. In its truest sense, the Vedic tradition is based on the eternal law of nature. In nature, each object is unique, yet all objects of the world, including all living beings, are interconnected by a common bond. Thus, each human being has his personal life, but by no means can he separate himself from his community, society, or humanity as a whole. His religion must offer peace and harmony in his personal, ethnic, and community life. How are you liking it so far? I hope you're hearing something that rings a bell for you, that is a takeaway or a bullet point or whatever. Community life sustained by high morals and ethical ideals can help one follow one's path with fewer conflicts and contradictions. Living in the world means responding to many duties simultaneously. Sometimes there may be conflict between assumed identities. In these situations, using discrimination, one must select the duty which provides for the welfare of a wider range of humanity. Whenever there is conflict between personal belief and universal values, one must choose the higher values of universal truth. One must learn to put aside all narrow-mindedness and become a part of the eternal kingdom. One must find a way to integrate one's personal goals and motives with the universal goal of humanity. One must find a way to integrate one's personal goals and motives with the universal goal of humanity. Such a philosophy of moral standards, ethical formulas, and spiritual awareness of universal brotherhood constitutes the perennial religion of mankind. This is the universal religion of the Vedas and the
It's
Upanishads,
8:30.
not today's sectarian dogmas and customs that create divisiveness and lead human minds to conflicts. Present-day religions must revitalize themselves by unfolding the inner stream of love, knowledge, generosity, courage, self-discipline, and forbearance, as exemplified by the sages. Religions do not flourish in history books, but in the lives of those who follow and practice it sincerely. Religious people must live according to the high ideals and examples of their ancestors, rather than merely admiring and adoring their sayings. By understanding the basic values of the Vedic tradition, we can embody the true nature of religion. Unless we practice the essence of this noble heritage, there is no way to teach it to our children. We must practice the essence ourselves. Women have the most important role to play in this task, for the mother is the child's first teacher. A mother's loving care and silent dialogue with her baby have the greatest impact on the young child's growth. Her moral and spiritual achievement is reflected in the upbringing of the child. At an early age, a child's curious mind and pure heart are open to learning. He follows the footprints of his caretakers. He believes in whatever he encounters, regardless of whether it is right or wrong, good or bad. A mother who is emotionally mature can help structuring the entire fabric of the child's life. She can inculcate in the child a foundation of self-acceptance and self-worth that will enable him to learn the principle of selfless giving. She can help her child understand that the life and objectives of other beings are never less significant than his own. She can make her child aware of the fact that his pleasures and pains are common to all children. When this awareness is cultivated in early childhood, it helps the child become an ideal citizen of the nation and upholder of the higher values. Such children can become creative and useful members of the society. Selflessness becomes a part of their nature. This cannot be taught by teachers in school or preachers in temples. It is tacitly imparted only by mothers who themselves have gone through the process of self-transformation and self-discipline. Without this, there is no hope for restructuring the society significantly. The development of technology and communication media has made the world a smaller community where people from various ethnic groups have to coexist. To achieve peace and harmony, religions of the world have to transcend their narrow outlook. They must strive to meet the ever-growing intellectual and spiritual needs of modern man. Today, a system of rituals and ceremonial practices alone is not sufficient to fulfill our inherent desire to be happy here and hereafter. Followers of all religions must become open to the great comprehensiveness of their religion. Religion is based on the high ideals of humanitarian thinkers and realized sages with no place for narrow parochial ideas. Today, world religions have been divided into numerous sects and cults. The branches of these religions have become extremely rigid and thus have separated themselves from one another. But one must remember the true meaning of Dharma as described in the scriptures. Dharma is that which upholds humanism and leads humanity toward fulfillment. The perennial truths, rules, and laws that help maintain peace and harmony in one's individual and community life constitute Dharma. Dharma applies for all times and in all places. It is the invisible force that helps individuals resolve their differences and thereby come closer to their fellow beings. Such a Dharma and its meaning cannot be captured in the English term religion. Any theory, principle, or policy that is not based on such a Dharma is deficient, since it fails to offer a valid truth for all times and all places. Social laws and even national constitutions devoid of such a Dharma will lead a society toward an inevitable decline. The central theme of the Upanishads is Brahman is real and the transitory objects of the world are unreal. Note here again that this word Brahman does not mean a him, God in the sky, or anything like that. It's a word that means oneness or the universal, absolute, non-dual reality or something like that. It teaches that Brahman alone exists and anything other than Brahman is illusory. Brahman is the source of life. Therefore, the highest goal of life lies in realizing the truth, Brahman. Remember again, the word Brahman is not referring to a deity, a god, a him. However, an exclusive emphasis on this doctrine can make one develop a negative attitude toward the world and worldly relationships by saying that the world is unreal. And we don't need to say, no, it's not here, and so therefore to heck with everybody else. Under the influences of such a doctrine, one might disregard worldly life. It is true that we have an inherent desire to know ourselves, but at the same time, we are under the influence of temporal forces. The sharing of thoughts and emotions with others is innate to every human being. If one disregards this, one cannot maintain one's existence in the world. Keeping that in mind, the great sages of the past set forth teachings that are helpful in balancing as well as meeting social, physical, mental, and spiritual demands. Before following the disciplines of the revealed scriptures, one must make an effort to understand the intent and effect of these sayings by instilling in one's mind the concept that Brahman alone is real and that all else is illusion. So if I hold up this book and I say that it's a book, which it is a book, of course it's a book, but in a sense it's unreal. Why? Because book is a combination of paper and ink. And so, which is, in a sense, more real, more ground reality, paper and ink or book? Where did the paper come from? The paper came from trees. Where did the trees come from? The forest. And so this is the kind of process where it's not that the forests don't exist, it's not that the trees don't exist, and it's not that the paper does not exist, and it's not that the book that does not exist. But another phrase that I like that he doesn't use here is that they have only relative existence. So compared to that ground reality out of which forests come and trees come and papers come, the book is less real. That absolute ground reality is what is real. That's the principle here. And we can live this, practice this, by exploring it throughout our lives. Everything around us this applies to, but we must individually contemplate on this principle ourselves. And then in some sense, it doesn't matter if you call it Brahman or one big O-N-E or truth or reality or infinity or any such term like that. But this is the essence of what Brahman about. The universe is unreal means that one should not get attached to the objects perceived by the senses. It does not mean that we should disregard them if they are helpful in achieving higher goals. It is impossible to attain a desired goal without proper means. Material objects are good as long as they are employed as means, but they become a source of bondage the moment one considers them to be the goal. Worldly resources become burdensome if they are not used properly. So the book that we're using is not the goal. The goal is not to have a big library. The goal is not to have more advanced college degrees to prove how smart we are. The goal is to take that concept and ponder it and gradually come to know the underlying truth or reality or Brahman. Hello again, Nellie. Worldly resources become burdensome if they are not used properly. Unless the transitoriness of worldly objects is understood, one cannot move forward, leaving trivial objects behind. So this is where you and I see that this world out here is constantly changing, but the underlying ground reality seems to remain the same. Go to any city of any country where there has been conflict in the past, wars in past history, and walk around the peaceful, quiet places that 1,000 years ago were battlefields, and they constantly change. What is a peaceful place today has a war tomorrow, and then in time it transforms, and still there is an underlying ground reality. Without knowing the relative insignificance of the objects of the world, and it's only relatively insignificant. Without that, one cannot grasp the higher truth, Brahman, which alone is real. And this kind of contemplation that we're talking about here is extremely useful, and it's why contemplation is, we often encounter and talk about that contemplation and meditation are companions. Contemplation is using our intelligence to go within and find within and uncover these essences, not as blind faith religious beliefs, but as our own personal observation. So we're validating it ourselves. In the initial stages of sadhana, the theory that the empirical world is illusory helps one withdraw one's mind from the external world and turn it inward toward the center of life. There's another beautiful word, simply center, simply the center. At a later stage, when the aspirant has attained freedom from the temptations of the world, he realizes that the whole universe is an expansion of Brahman. And note that comes later. There's a sequencing in there. I'll read it again. At a later stage, when the aspirant has attained freedom from the temptations of the world, maybe not perfectly, but somewhat, then he realizes that the whole universe is an expansion of the Brahman. So we don't start at the end, we contemplate through, and we realize that the insight unfolds over time. Then he no longer sees the difference between Brahman and the world. But that comes in time. He does not need to separate himself from the world, for he perceives the world as part of his own being. This stage of spiritual evolution includes all and excludes none. We may hold the concept early on, but through this contemplation and meditation process over time, it gets clearer and clearer. Thus, there springs an eternal stream of love for all from his illumined heart. This whole universe is Brahman, is the highest principle, whereas the universe is unreal and Brahman alone is real, serves as a stepping stone. This is the concept that we ran into just a few minutes ago. The unrealness of the world and the realness of Brahman, that's a stepping stone. According to the Upanishads, an aspirant must analyze. Now, I'll set and point out here for you too, for those of you who are hanging out a lot around what we do together. he is saying in simple explanations here,
It's 8:45.
without quoting the actual words. These are actually the comments that are in the Mahavakyas. And we have discussed that before, and in the videos that collections that we put together, and the Udemy course that we have on Jnana Yoga, the Path of Contemplation, I review extensively 7 of these Mahavakyas. So each one of these that he's describing here as stages along the way, they come from, or the principle is captured in those 7 simple statements. So the idea that Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, that's the fancy contemplation for the world is unreal, Brahman is real. Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. I'm not going to go through them all right now. I just wanted to pause and say that to you, that this is what we're talking about. And there's, if you want to look at the other video resources or the Udemy course that we have, this refers directly to 7 major Mahavakyas. And the reason I do those 7, there are many statements that could be looked at as being Mahavakyas, but these are ones that I was taught to do. And so all I am doing is being, so to speak, playfully a gossip, just passing on what was freely given to me. And that's what we're doing here when he writes this in this way. He's not even putting here the Sanskrit things where we see that the whole universe is Brahman, Sarvam Kalvidam Brahman. There's the fancy word, the Mahavakya. So anyway, that's there. If you feel inclined to go, it'll make it seem complex because they're foreign words, they're Sanskrit. That makes it seem hard. But the simplicity of it is that this whole thing here being talked about is summarized in essentially 7 sentences, 7 Mahavakyas, 7 mantras. A Vakya is simply an utterance, a sentence. Maha means great. So those 7 contain all this wisdom. According to the Upanishads, an aspirant must analyze his spiritual growth so that he can practice those specific philosophical methods that are applicable to his present level of spiritual evolution. One must not misapply philosophical doctrines and spiritual practices belonging to different stages of life. For a beginner who is still entangled in sensual pleasures, listen to this good example. For a beginner who is still entangled in sensual pleasures, the philosophy that the world is unreal and Brahman alone is real is more applicable than the next level of philosophical doctrine. Only after a seeker has assimilated the wisdom of the first level should the next step be taken. Now, that's not saying if you go to those 7 Mahavakyas, it doesn't mean don't read ahead. It doesn't mean don't play with them. But it's useful to realize that this thing unfolds in stages. It's very easy. One of the common things I've heard over years is the universe is one because we are all connected. Listen to the flaw of that. It's an indication of a lack of understanding. If we say that we are one because we are all connected, it's like going out to the ocean and saying, look, somebody came along and collected up 1,000 waves. Here's a wave here. I'm going to take all these waves and I'm going to duct tape them together or glue them together or bind them together in some way. And we are going to invent a thing called ocean. And then we can say the waves are all one with the ocean because we connected the waves. And that's not the reality. In the ocean metaphor, you just have to look at, if you look at the ocean one way, you see a bunch of waves. If you blink your eyes and look another way, you say, wait a minute. The waves in some sense are unreal, but because what is real is the ocean in front of me. And the oceans are a beautiful example of how we can practice this contemplation. Only after a seeker has assimilated the wisdom of the first level should the next step be taken. By the same token, the advanced seekers must not impose their conviction of the universe is unreal. Listen to this. There's good practical worldly advice in this. The advanced seekers, once we understand Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya, that's what we're talking about here. They should not impose their conviction of the universe is unreal on those who have not yet learned the method of coping with worldly objects. So this is a pretty common thing that people that I've gotten to know well run into as they start to understand this principle. And then maybe they, over a holiday, will be back with their family of origin and come back, and they're sort of in shock because they realize, gee, my family doesn't have any idea what I'm talking about. And this is the way it works. So the principle here is don't push. If you gain some higher insight, we don't want to push it on other people. And we also don't want our ego to run wild with it and say, wow, look at me and how smart I am. Must not impose their conviction of the universe is unreal on those who have not yet learned the method of coping with worldly objects. An aspirant in his initial stage of sadhana need not renounce the world, but he must learn to utilize material objects creatively and skillfully. This means learning to use worldly objects as a means and not as an end. It is for this reason that the scriptures insist that the great men should live a lifestyle that is pure and simple on the one hand, and exemplary and practical on the other hand. It is not necessary for everyone to imitate each act of a great man. Only those acts that are applicable to the individual's personal growth should be adopted. The others can be adopted later. If we are to live in peace and happiness, every nation, community, society, and individual must envision universal and humanitarian ideals and must strive to practice them in thought, speech, and action. Now, does that mean that what we're talking about here is let's go out and preach to the world and convert them to this way of thinking? No, that goes back to the sentence we just went through. It says basically don't mess with people. Be open to sharing, but don't interfere with people who are at a certain stage of life. Religion and even politics must be founded on moral and spiritual fundamentals. Politics and religion must not have power and control, but the welfare of humanity as their goal. In ancient India, politics was regarded as a branch of ethics. It was not confined to legislation and the rules of administration. Rather, it was open to exploration and experimentation in the light of truth. The laws were meant to make life less complicated. Peace, justice, and liberty for all were the prime purposes of politics. The objective of various religions similarly helped ancient India to explore the possibility of different paths in those ideals. The different branches of spiritual practice evolved not for the division of society, but as different approaches in the search for universal values and egalitarian ethics. And then, as we know, the world changed. We mentioned that before, that the world goes through cycling. And so sometimes we're in a cycle where things seem to be going pretty smoothly in alignment with this word called Dharma. And other times it seems very off track and life in the world seems to be impossible. And yet sometimes things shift and we go through the cycle again. Anyway, let's pause here. This is to be continued. There's a lot more in this section here on religion and Dharma. And it's got some pretty rich stuff, doesn't it? I hope that there's some little piece of what we just went through that caught your attention and leaves you personally something to contemplate upon in a useful way. Hi, Scott. And so to be continued. Pretty exciting stuff. Humanity, this is a call to humanity. I can't help that. I know that's kind of stupid, but I enjoy that. I'm not the original one who did. I don't remember who the first one I heard say that was this title of this book, and somebody started saying humanity. Anyway, to be continued. Thank you for visiting. I hope this is fun for you. I'm having a ball. I hope you are too. Okay. Thank you for playing all. Hi, Nilesh. I didn't see you pop in before. I hear that voice of that goddess in the subtle realm calling out to me, push the button. But of course, I have to push 2 buttons. So there, I've pushed button number 1. And maybe if we do this very, very well, maybe we can find a glimpse of this subtler meaning of this word Dharma and this related word Brahman. And maybe we can get a little glimpse of that in the silence that is after an Om.